is that it gets interrupted by people wanting to come on stage and talk, and then the conversation can go in any direction at once. So did you have something you wanted to say about objective morality?
I could lead with a comment that, going into my own opinions too much, people who don't believe in objects, I'm a bit curious how they would defend a position like objective morality. I guess because I'm tending towards the position that objectivity is maybe not something we have access to, but I'll step aside and listen into your monologue. Thank you.
Okay. So why specifically are you highlighting people who don't believe in what objects? You said, yeah. Why?
I guess I'm trying to work on the what's it called? Internal critique of
Okay.
other positions.
All right. And so you're internally critiquing people, I guess, a certain type of metaphysics. Is that the deal?
I'm looking at approaching that question maybe in a different way, reframing with objective morality. What has to happen before something can be said to be objective in the first place? That would sort of split it, because I guess it kind of cycles to this. Ever find you have the same conversations over and over, just in like slightly different forms?
Yep. Okay.
Like halfway through, you
Yeah.
realize that you've already had this convo like 25,000 times.
Yes. So the topic is in many cases a dead horse, and yet it is very relevant. It's a relevant and useful philosophical distinction because at the end of the day, we have to have morality and ethics, and most people are interested in politics, and most people ground their political alignments and decisions in some kind of ethics or morality, and typically they would like to think that their political views are justified, and that their moralities are justified. So then it becomes a question of how is it justified, and so the question of whether morality is objective or subjective becomes very relevant. So despite it being a dead horse that lots of people might be tired of hearing about. So yeah, and as far as your question of like, what does it mean for something to be objective? Asking someone who doesn't have a dog in the objective fight isn't going to be very satisfying. I don't know. I'll leave that up to anyone who wants to say something is objective. But a lot of people, at least in these circles, are going to go with the definition of mind independent. Of course, that's an answer that leads to further questions, but it could be used. And so
Is it sort of like, does there exist an objective, or does there exist some sort of imperative that we'd all be better for following?
if there was, I mean, that's almost a metaphysical question. You asked if there exists an imperative, so I don't know. But I guess I'm not going to take on the role of answering the question so much as fleshing out
Okay,
its
well, I'll
importance.
say my
It's
answer then. I think
all right.
morality means something because we don't have to be moral. And I'm not going to say it's objective, because I don't think that makes sense within a lot of worldviews. Maybe it makes sense in my worldview, but I don't want to I don't want to lead with my worldview, because I'm sort of assuming a lot there. It means something because it's a choice, and it has to do with consideration of others. To me, something would be more moral if it was considering other people's well-being. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I see. And so, yeah, it's at least we can at least say yeah, it's meaningful, and that whatever the heck that means. If we both know what the other's talking about. But so yeah, so if anyone would like to come up on stage and talk about this topic, it's open. You can come at any. You can just raise your hand at any time. Otherwise, I'm going to keep rambling. So, let's see. I ultimately think that, as with the topic of free will that we talked about the other day, it is hard to establish a theory of morality that does not directly overlap with the various other branches of philosophy. Lots of people are either going to, well, some people are going to try to ground their morality loosely in their metaphysics, but not all. Some people don't mind it being compartmentalized. And so I guess I'll get into some of my opinions on this matter. I've talked before about the soundness cogency funnel, as I call it, that we can talk about whether there are objective metaphysics or objective morals. But at the end of the day, we would like to think we could probably make a sound argument or a cogent argument about our alleged objective morality or metaphysics or epistemology, what have you. And if we couldn't, then it begs the question, how are we saying it's objective is it objective in anything other than name? And if you think it's an easy task, then we have to get into the conversation of theories of truth and how to actually determine the truth of premises. So there's the axioms of logic that we used to eventually evaluate what is valid, but then that's not enough for us. We need to make it sound, and soundness is where it ultimately, in my opinion, dissolves back down into the elusiveness of philosophy. So what I'm saying is the issue of whether morality is objective directly inherits the issue of how to make an argument sound. So what do you think about that, Jen?
Interesting. It reminds me of your combo with T-Jump the other day. I was wondering if you got any further insights from that, because I thought it was pretty interesting.
Let's see. I haven't watched it the second time. I had the conversation. I haven't, it was a long conversation we had, so I haven't gone back over it. I
Speaking
typically
specifically, sorry, go ahead.
what? Sorry,
I was going to say specifically about the Bayes theorem and how to reconcile that with the longing you'd experienced for something more fleshed out with regards to induction.
yeah. That might start getting into other territory that I'm not totally sure how relevant it is to the topic of morality being objective or subjective. Yeah. So, but yeah, that was an interesting topic, the whole thing about induction, and it was interesting at first in the conversation the other day, but I think it dragged on for a while. Let's see. There is so this issue that I pointed out about whether a system of morality can be sound. This kind of filters out the issue of the is-ought problem, because I don't know, the is-ought problem is a good experiment to kind of make us at first scratch our heads about, oh, okay, I can't get an is from an ought. Okay, so killing people, means that they are no longer alive. Therefore, I should not murder people. Okay, maybe we agree with that, but how do we actually establish that that follows? Okay, there's a way around this. We can just get rid of the ought statement and just make it an is statement and say it's wrong to murder. And then we can make valid arguments about that. But then the only problem is there's the issue of, okay, well, how do we establish those definitions after we've set up our valid argument? How do we establish that those premises are actually true? And by what means are we saying that they're true? So the problem doesn't go away. If we go around the ought statement and we just try to build a morality out of is statements, we still run into the problem of how to establish the premises. So, of course, most people who've talked to me know what my answer is that we don't have to break our backs trying to establish something that's sound. We just need to make a model that's useful. So that, I guess, is, I suppose, maybe my challenge to people who would try to establish it as morality as definitively objective or even definitively subjective is, if you focus on your morality being useful and applicable, you won't feel this urge to rule out alternative systems of morality, which is what other people in politics and morality end up becoming preoccupied with, is negating their opposition. If you mind your own business and focus on making your system useful, then you won't get absorbed into these sorts of distractions. So, yeah. All right, so
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm wondering how to establish what you're saying in a more concrete way, almost to connect it to the fact that materiality's changing, which is the is. So the ought maybe be changing as a consequence to that, and so it couldn't be reduced to syntax. Just quickly freestyling here. Hey, Seth.
How's it going, Seth? Roast me.
Bro, you mentioned something earlier.
Hold up, I'm having trouble hearing you.
No.
Yeah.
This microphone headset's probably seen better days.
You just started to come through a bit better, but as it stands, you're like almost 30 dBs lower.
Right. I know. I have to put the microphone right in front. Practically. It's insane. Okay, Gaspar mentioned earlier about that people should just mind their own business about morality, about their moral system, and that they should just focus on making it more useful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Do you think that people that adhere to different moral systems throughout the world, if everyone just minded their own business, let's say we universalize this, everyone just minded their own business, following their own whatever moral system that they belong to, right? And they just focus on making it more useful in whatever sense the sense of useful is, wouldn't possibility here be that they all eventually just merge together unconsciously or unwittingly, merge together one moral system?
I'm not sure if I'd be sold on that being the outcome.
I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be the outcome, it must happen that way. But I'm just saying that, it's if it wound up that people adhering to their own moral system, but then trying to make it useful to what is useful here?
Useful is yet another relative construct, okay, that I leave up to the user to stipulate. But what I'm going to say is, I don't know what the alternative is, but I'll say the problem with the situation is that everyone thinks they're on the good guy squad, and they become preoccupied with trying to establish their morality as definitively justified because they feel like they have to rule out their opposition. And if we looked at if we took this into a more abstract area of philosophy, like different models of, I don't know, logic, for example.
Is that useful to do? Demonize the other side?
It may be for some people, but I wonder whether when that becomes what a movement or a way of thinking is about, I wonder if it actually is serving the purpose that the user intended. I wonder if so what we can say, at least about usefulness, well, maybe we can agree on, is that at the very least, the device you're using, you want it to do what you intend. And so I question whether a system where someone becomes, they start off with these values and then they depart from those values and they're focused on negating the opposition. I question at that point whether that system is doing what they intended it to do.
See, the thing is, now we have a hierarchy of norms, where the morals themselves are supposed to be norms, right, that we're talking about, right? So now we have norms that we have to keep in mind. That these norms have to be in the service of satisfying, or the intention that we have in mind with our moral system, or something like that. There's no problem with this, logically speaking, as hierarchies can easily be accommodated for in a logical system. I'm just curious if that's the direction you want to go in.
Yeah, maybe I'm going to ask you to refine your question a little bit. I'm not totally following.
Sure, absolutely. So I probably brought this up with a couple people already. So the idea is the following. Okay? So say you have like descriptions of stuff in the world, like readings of temperatures, like the air outside, the weight or the mass of objects, things like that, right? So, colorings and whatnot. Okay, so there's sort of descriptions of stuff in the world. It's like no value. It's not like it's a little bit value laden. Okay, but we're trying to just describe stuff, as they are the best we can, right? And then on the other hand, you have okay, look, like in a particular game, I'm trying to apply this strategy to affect this end, Whereas I'm more like consciously engaged in goal satisfying activity. Whether it is playing a video game, or you're actually playing a sport, or you're actually just trying to follow the rules of etiquette in your day-to-day interactions, or maybe something more serious like an emergency, right? Things like this, right? You're trying to satisfy a goal. You're in this goal sort of directed activity. Okay, so we can describe this talk of succeeding in doing such or failing to doing such as this sort of like normative kind of talk. We're not describing just structures and attributes and things like that. We're actually talking about something distinct from that. Let's just say, okay, that's like mapping onto that. Has to map.
Are you able to hop in with a question from the audience before? Because I just saw Order of Melchizedek just join.
Sure.
Lusto asks, can objective morality deliver various models of societies? And if so, how do we gauge the value, worth, or reason for what that society bring on? In an unbiased way. Furthermore, argument, would it be okay to mind our business if we found out that the neighbor likes to abuse their pets? That's for you, Marvelous Gaspar. All right, you're.
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat that?
It's in the main stage chat.
Okay, let me find it.
Sweet. Just
Well, Kizadek, you want to tell us what you think about objective morality? I
All right,
mean, I
so
think I might know already, but you
can
want to go
objective
ahead,
morality
Gaspar?
deliver us various models of society? And if so, how do we gauge the value, worth, or reason of what that society can bring on, of what that society can bring on an unbiased view? Okay. So I don't know if okay, and then they give an argument. Argument: would it be okay to mind our business if we found out that the neighbor likes to abuse their pets? So maybe I wasn't going that radical with the claim. Okay. Maybe it is.
You're
Maybe it is
saying the
part of.
second part was for Sep.
Oh, okay. But Sep didn't say anything about minding our business. I said that. So I. Oh, okay. Maybe it is for Sep. Okay. So yeah, answer it, Sep.
shit. Well, I gotta switch to main stage chat. Let's see what we got here. So argument: would it be okay to mind our business if we found out that the neighbor likes to abuse their pets?
I'm getting a lot of
So
pushback for the. Sorry,
so
go ahead.
thinking, if you're asking me, if you found out, right, that the neighbor likes to abuse their pets, right, then unfortunately it has become your business. Okay. Unfortunately. So, usually we would just go about our day doing whatever, if, not knowing, blissful in our ignorance, right? But lo, if you come upon something, an emergency or someone committing a crime, right? So, there's this thing called the law, right? And so, your decisions at that moment are very important to what will sort of determine your position or role in what is going on. Okay, so if you believe what your neighbor is doing is wrong, okay, if that being a crime, they should be penalized for it, then you should take a stand. You should all the respective authorities, whatever, you know what to do. So yes, it's not that like minding your own business and that like the moral activity of others around you. They're not mutually exclusive concepts. That's my answer.
Yeah, and I think I'd agree with that. So I can tell my language of saying mind your own business, which was kind of shooting from the hip when I said that. Although I still agree with it, I'm not like walking it back. Like I think that was appropriate language at the time. Is maybe requiring some clarification. Minding your own business will differ based on your model of morality. So for the Muslim who believes in Sharia law, spreading, their ideology in whatever means they want to do it, that might be minding their own business. I'm just saying that it is a waste of time and energy to try to actually establish or become preoccupied with making the case that one's norms and values can somehow be used to rule out the alternatives. Just focus on demonstrating the usefulness of your norms or your values. That's what I would say is more productive. That's what I mean by minding your own business. So in the case of like, oh, the neighbor's abusing, doing this or that. Oh, okay, well, according to your morals, um, just implementing whatever those morals are, whether it's doing something about that, calling the police or whatever, that all falls under the umbrella of minding your own business. So I'm not advocating for some radical apathy here. I'm advocating for a certain type of alignment and implementation of our values that are what I would say are a better use of our energy than trying to find some foundation that will once and for all definitively establish our morals as true to the exclusion of its alternatives. So I hope that clarifies what I mean.
They've given another comment. So if you discover this information from osmosis of your own doing, of doing your own business, it's okay. But if you're to pursue the information from outside your life, then it's not information you should be using. I guess they're looking for a clarification here.
No, those are not things I'm necessarily saying. No, that's not necessarily the case. What I'm saying is, what I'm saying is, I guess I'll give an example. Let's forget about morality for a second. And let's pretend that we use the Roman numerals to count instead of the Arabic numerals. And let's say that we're in a situation where we're trying to prove that the Roman numerals are the definitive number system. That's just futile. In fact, even with some of the built-in utilities of the Arabic numerals and place value, sure, you can demonstrate its functionality, but still at the end of the day, if you argue about it, if you try to definitively say that the Arabic numerals are more useful than the Roman numerals, that's a waste of energy. What you should be doing is demonstrating the functionality of the Arabic numerals. Okay, so instead of trying to establish the Arabic numerals as more functional than the Roman numerals, just do math. That's what I'm saying. That's what I mean by minding your own business. And so you take this example, you take it back to models of morality. Instead of singing about how we're on the good guy squad, just implement our morals. That's what I think. And so, no, I do not think that there are any stipulations about whether the information you receive from osmosis, this, that, and the other. I make no such stipulations. So, yeah, volusto. That is my answer.
Oh, very interesting. Oh, they're still going. Would you like to speak to Melchizedek, or would you like me to keep reading these comments here?
No, they're I think they understand. They said fair point. Thank you for your explanation.
Can I finish?
Oh yeah. So Sep, you can, if you still had something to say, you can finish, and then Melchizedek, if you had something to say, then you can go. You can talk after Sep. All right.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's just I wanted to. Sorry about that. I just wanted. So the idea here is, so on one hand we have like descriptions of stuff in the world, and on the other hand we have like the sort of more normative language about working with that stuff on a more like day-to-day basis in the world. But then we also kind of start. That's like on the first rung of the hierarchy. The second rung is where we have descriptions about those about that goal-oriented activity that we were doing. Okay. So, and those going to be like, that's also going to be descriptive. Just as descriptive as what we were describing about stuff in the world. But instead now we're describing our goals, describing our intents, we were describing what we're doing or what we had done. Right, and then there's a second sort of. Sorry about that. It's not right in front of me. So, and then the second kind of.
You just got extremely loud.
Yeah, I know, because I had to put the microphone like right in front of my face, or else it's just
okay.
not.
All right.
Sorry about
okay.
that.
That's right.
Really sorry about that, but and so then the second The second part of that second layer of that hierarchy would be sort of the goal-directed activity or talk that that would be focused on the descriptions of our goal-directed activity on the first layer of that hierarchy. So the idea is that if you could sort it out that way, in terms of our sort of normative talk and our descriptive talk, in this sort of layered way, I think it'd be more, be a little bit, it'd be clearer. That's the idea. So that, so that everything doesn't have to all be on one layer, and then we're trying to like do too much, and there's not enough to do with that.
Okay. Can you? Okay. So you sort of covered a lot. Can you maybe just refine that and shorten it real quick and give like an elevator pitch?
Well, that's as elevator pitch as it got. Like,
Okay,
guess if
I
we're
understand.
we're going up to the 90th floor.
Okay, all right. Yeah, no, I got it. Yeah. So I just want to. I like to be aware of the audience and maybe try to make sure they understand what's being said. So anyway, okay, I think I understand what you're saying. So if you're done saying that, Seth, I'm going to let Melchizedek say what he was going to say.
I was just finishing up that distinction I mentioned earlier when we were talking about. I brought in like this, like we could bring in hierarchy of this, like a hierarchical kind of distinction. That's what I was alluding.
Yep. Yeah. All right. So order. What do you have to say?
Okay, so the short answer first, yes, I believe there is objective morality. And, I've often heard the claim, that there are so many different cultures with different values that there can't be objective morals. Just look at how different we are. Off the bat, I would actually agree with this objection. There are many different cultures appearing to be morally different on the surface. I think it's important, however, if you were to read between the lines, I think it becomes apparent that these different cultures are not really that different. And I think it's important as you read between the lines, so to speak, to keep in mind that when we are looking at cultural diversity, we need to determine whether differences are really about core morals or instead about applications of that core moral truth. For example, like what constitutes murder. Some of my classmates actually, and when we had a debate about objective morality, what my classmates did not realize is that these differences were in how morals were applied, not a difference in morals. And I think Peter Kreeft says this, if you don't mind me. I'm almost done, if that's okay. I don't know if there's a time restriction.
There is not.
Okay. So he says this. He says, no culture has ever existed which believed and taught what Nietzsche called for a transvaluation of all values. There have been differences in emphasis. For instance, our ancestors valued courage more than we do, while we value compassion more than they did. But there has never been anything like the relativism of opinions about values that the relativist teaches as factual history. Just imagine what that would be like. Try to imagine a society where justice, honest, courage, wisdom, hope, and self-control were deemed morally evil, and unrestricted selfishness, cowardice, lying, betrayal, addiction, and despair were deemed morally good. Such a society has never been found on Earth. If it exists anywhere, I would say it's only in hell and its colonies. Only Satan and his worshippers say, "Evil, be thou my good." So I think it really comes down to a case-by-case basis, and I'll close with this. For instance, in the Hindu religion, they believe in reincarnation. Some of these people will starve themselves because they will not eat a cow, and that's because they believe that their great uncle died or somebody, a loved relative, has passed away and has reincarnated into a cow. So looking on the surface at this, it may look like there are differences in morals, but we need to read between the lines, like I said earlier. And as we read between the lines, we see that the morals of our culture and their cultures are the same. They think it is wrong to eat the cow because they believe that is their great uncle. we also believe it is wrong to eat our great uncle. So as we can see, this really is not an objection. It's just a matter of not digging deeper.
All right. All right.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Anyone have anything to say to that? No. Okay. So what I'll say is that you may say so I see the distinctions you're making. Like for example, the in the past, courage was valued more, and
Mhm.
as we move forward, compassion is valued more.
Yeah.
And you'll say these may appear to be different, but the closer we look, we are trying to be courageous for the same reasons that we are trying to be compassionate.
Mm-hmm.
That being the case, morality and ethics are such that it's not always about the ends. Sometimes the means are judged as moral or not. And so those nuances, even if they're surface level, can make all the difference in whether we're going to judge something as moral or not. I don't want to invoke the tropes of those three branches of so there's virtue ethics, deontology, which is the morality of actions. There's consequentialism, which places emphasis on consequences. And, these three legs may not always be aligned. A person might lean towards one of them,
Mm-hmm.
but it shows kind of different standards by which we can judge morality. And so depending on which of those devices you're using to look at things, whether it's actions or consequences, that will determine of what significance the differences that you pointed out are about, like the courage versus the compassion and the underlying similarities.
Mm-hmm.
Because we could say that, like, okay, maybe there is this underlying similarity, but at the end of the day, we do judge the means as well as the result. So yeah, without definitively answering that, I just want to illustrate the further complication of morality that comes up. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I will say, yes, I think if we read between the lines, we see values being preserved just with different forms throughout history.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
the values, the forms swap out.
Mm-hmm.
But upon examination and reading between the lines, I'm not sure I can tell you specifically what is between the lines. I can say, yeah, I think that's there. I agree with you, but
Mm-hmm.
I can't find the substance we're talking about.
Right.
So I don't want a disagreement to be purely of semantics,
Right.
because I agree. But how we frame it and how we symbolize it is
Mm-hmm.
often going to make a lot of difference. So do you see what I'm saying? Because I think
I
I understand
do.
where you're coming from. Yeah.
Yes, and I understand what you're saying as well. Yes.
Okay. Do you have anything else to add or what?
Um. No, I think that's about it. So thank you, Gaspar, for having me up here. I do
Okay.
appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks.
Do I need to
Porter.
go back to the audience?
It's up to you if you still want to talk or if you want to hang out. It's kind of loose. It's up to you.
Yeah. Are you guys okay with me hanging up out here?
Yep.
Do you guys?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I know. Yeah. I know you guys are. A couple of you guys have told me you guys are okay with me. So thank you,
Yep.
Gaspar. Appreciate it.
As long as you're not gaslighting me with precept, then I like my Christian friends.
Yeah, I know. I know. We talked about that.
Right. So, well, and even honestly, I do try to put some thought into trying to get along with precepts as well. It just like takes all of my CPU processing power. It takes like all of my intellect to try to figure out how to get along with precepts. But so anyway, what's up, Eddie? So you are a moral relativist, right? You're a moral nihilist, aren't you? You.
No.
Oh, okay. So tell us about your objective morality propaganda?
Let's see. If you think it's wrong for me to punch you in the face, and that's your intuition and initial reaction, then moral realism is true. There, folded like a chair, done.
All right.
Boom.
Great.
No, actually, I'm actually, as we speak, I'm editing the our conversation so I can get it posted.
Oh, you haven't even posted it yet. Okay.
No, I have this thing called life, and sometimes that said thing gets a little hectic.
Yep.
I do appreciate the confidence, though, thinking it'd be done that quick.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Anyway.
So is order a precept?
I don't think he is. If he is, then
No, I just came
He's
in
like-
the last minute and I heard something
he's
about
a.
precept.
If he is, he's like a sleeper. He doesn't reveal it right away
You
until
gotta-
it's too late.
You gotta watch out for Alex. Now, Alex is a Satanist precept. Really interesting.
Yeah, but I really don't want to get into the topic of Satanism or cults today. So yeah. Order, are you a precept?
From from other
It's okay if
previous
you are.
discussions and debates, yes, I have, and because it, like you, Gaspar, and I'm trying to accommodate people who are like, "Ugh, a precept, not again." You know, I'm trying to approach my delivery different, which is what I hope was the case today, and how I presented, at least my perspective. So I'm just doing it because, you know, for people who, like I said, just like, oh no, I'm just trying to accommodate, and I'm trying to. I think it's good too. It's kind of like, hey, it's kind of like a personal assignment for like debating. It's like find a new way to argue because these people don't want you to assume this or to make your position clear on this. So approach it a
Yeah.
different way. And so I find that to be challenging, and I find it to be unique, and I like it. So. That satisfy your question?
Why do you like it?
Okay, sorry, my audio cut out. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah. So yeah, frankly, it's not the position of precept itself. Like if you hold the position that I actually already hold some position implicitly, that's okay. It's what really frustrates me, I think, and other people is how difficult some precepts are to talk to, you know, because they're constantly, I don't know, I feel like they're constantly misrepresenting me. So, like some of these people over in the PNR server and things like that. So, anyway, without getting into that detail, yeah, I appreciate that you're willing to try to accommodate. So,
Yeah. Let me one last thing on top of that. Order. I would go away from precept and think of it or argue for it as some type of ontological necessity, starting with epistemology. If you start with epistemology, and you can get a conversation going about whether there are these transcendental things or universals or things like that, then you can move on from there to the ontology of them, how they exist, which would be God. It's just the arguing that you must first, therefore, have an ontology before you can have an epistemology, and that's the problem with
Right.
a lot of precepts is.
So figuring out the how before the why.
Exactly. Well, that's what they're doing. They're putting the cart before the
Right.
horse. They're
Right.
because the truth of the matter, and this is the last time I've got a little recording with the last time I talked to Darth Dawkins. That's exactly you can't. I asked him, "How do you know precept is the right way?" And he appealed to the Bible. I said, "How do you know that's right? How do you know that's true?" And I just kept asking him, "How do you know?" And then somebody else butted in and derailed it. But that's the fact of the matter. If he's going to make a claim, that you must presuppose God or a Christian God, or the Christian God or something like that. Well, you're starting out in epistemology, and then
Mhm.
you're forcing other people to have an ontology, even though you didn't have an ontology to begin with. You started off with epistemology, and it's unfair, it's dishonest. Not always, but a lot of times it's dishonest. And Van Til meant for it to stop conversation. He didn't want. They argued, Bonson and Van Til, was because they don't have this ontology to account for all of these things, then you shouldn't even have the conversation with them. So in other words, somebody
Mhm.
must have an ontology to account for before you can even have a conversation with them, and it's just ludicrous.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
Eddie, I didn't know that. Didn't know those details about it. So I hope their goal was not that that method was going to flip people. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but I can't imagine that being particularly persuasive to people
Well,
other than, hubris teens in the
here,
PNR server who follow Darth Dawkins.
here's the catch. No, it's actually there's academics that argue for the same thing. It's just not as misrepresented and abused as most internet presuppositionalists. But you got to take one thing into account, Gaspar. They came out of it is a reformed apologetic. So they're not into converting people because they think God is the one who ultimately calls them. People have no part in it at all. They're Calvinists. So it fits right perfect with
Interesting.
their
Interesting. Huh.
theology. And that's just it. That it is exactly to rebut and try and refute the non-believer, because they can't account, quote unquote, for these things that exist. It literally is meant to try and win an argument or not have a conversation about it.
That is interesting. So it is specifically for Calvinists to use, and it works under that worldview, with that kind of determination built in,
Yep,
right?
exactly.
And
There's
so
a divine determinism.
so non-Calvinists like Jay Dyer should not be using precept.
Not in the spirit of what it was developed for. The I I don't know why he does anyway. I mean, I don't think Darth is actually Calvinist, and he uses the argument too, but it is specifically from the Calvinist or Reformed theology that the apologetic was developed for. So, I mean, they're literally like they're screwing themselves, because if they think that if there's like some kind of synergy uh, between the human and the compelling of God, there's not this irresistible grace. They're definitely not,
I have a hard time
converting
understanding that.
anybody.
Yep, I can.
Yep.
What were you going to ask?
So
Order.
there's some
Well, hold on a second.
interesting way.
Hold on one second. Order was going to ask a question first.
I was gonna say the whole Calvinist thing doesn't really make sense to me. Um, like for instance, for those who might have a hard time comprehending like the logical conclusion which flows from the 5 points of Calvinism, I'll try to like break it down. It's like so that way people can hopefully see the ramifications of this belief
Well,
system clearly.
I can break it down real quick. It makes God the author of evil and responsible for all evil that happens in the world. Um, and not only that, it follows from it that because God chooses whom he wants, then he chose to create people to go to hell when he could have made everybody the elect.
Yeah, not just that, but the other thing that I see that I think is like a head scratcher and is troublesome is since only the elect are saved, and since only God knows who the elect truly are, whom he has predestined for glory, and since a person may be self-deceiving into thinking she or he is the elect, she or he can never be fully assured that they are among those predestined for salvation.
Yes, and that's actually a point I bring up a lot with him is, it's extremely arrogant for you to tell me that you're pretty sure you're one of the elect and you're going out
Um,
here with all the losers.
it sounds like they're practicing a form of pride, and isn't that a very dangerous sin?
Well,
Mhm.
it's even worse than that. They can be convinced they're one of the elect all the way up until 3 weeks left in their life, and then they become an atheist. Well, it turns out they weren't one of the elect when they thought they were. It's ridiculous.
So, what I wanted to was you guys were talking about the function of suppositional argument within history, and I don't know if you guys know inspiring philosophy at all.
Yeah, I know
Who is
about
that?
him.
Inspiring philosophy, yes.
I know
Yeah,
about
so
inspiring philosophy.
what he's been interviewed about supposition, and what he said about presupposition is that the goal of apologetics is to convert people or God, right, in a way that uh, relates to the people of the time. So he's saying that there's no actual biblical ground for presuppositional arguments. Is the first thing he'll say, and then secondly is what he'll say is that it's just not effective, and that's why he's inspiring philosophy using the digital physics argument more of like empirical inductive argument to argue for God rather
Oh, did you say inspiring philosophy?
than
Oh, okay. I thought you said something else. Yeah, Michael Jones is a friend of mine.
smart guy. The Michael Jones.
Yeah, he's a pretty cool cat. He's a lot of people misunderstand him. I've talked to him, not so much in the public eye and private and stuff, and
Yeah,
uh
I'm not, but I
damn.
find like like it's like video essay. It's like really like interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, inspiring philosophy. Yeah, he's a funny character. He dabbled with the quantum woo for a while, kind of like Johann Ratz. And I've also seen him espouse the moral argument, which
Dude, don't ever compare Michael to rats again.
okay. What do you know about Johann Ratz?
So my mama told me if I don't have anything good to say about somebody, don't say anything at all.
Okay.
No, he's eccentric.
Uh,
He's all right. I just don't buy into like him and John Connor. These uh pre-computational ontic pre-computational theism and all of this physics and mathematics and the universe is like a calculator and all this crap. It is so unnecessarily complicated.
yeah. This is kind of what I was talking to you about the other night, Eddie. How when I was a Christian, there was a point where I got the idea that I was just contriving post rationalizations, basically, to try to uphold my view that I had already made up my mind about. It's like I had decided what my conclusion is, and I was just swapping out different premises that I wanted to lead to that conclusion. And I think people like John Connor and Johann and Ratz are what you get when someone never got out of that way of thinking. I'm not saying all Christians are stuck in that. I'm just saying a certain type is.
I think that you could say that about a lot of people, and like a lot of so
I think that's
listeners
right. Yeah.
have like a bias or whatever.
I think you can point to stuff like that. atheists aren't so much married to their atheism. Where their true values lie are going to be often in their politics or their humanism or something like that. And
I do declare.
And so they're going to be about as testy about their precious humanism as they are, as a theist is about some of their dogmas. So I agree. Yes.
Big titties.
Okay.
You're an ambassador, boy got ideas. Come on now. This is a serious devotee of work.
What?
Jen, did you already say your position on this subject or state?
I didn't really go into objective morality. I just said like that morality in my view is consideration of others.
Mhm.
I don't really go into it too much.
I was just curious because like kind of going back to your like you know how you say that you have so these experiences of like the past lives thing. I was going to ask if it's led to the conclusion that yes, there are objective moral values or duties because you've acquired it or because you've seen it throughout the past, or that it should be necessary or something like that. Because I think your position is pretty unique, and I was just really curious if that had any kind of impactful or influential like measure for a question like this, objective morality.
Thanks for asking. I would say that if you subscribe to the system, there is a duty to be virtuous.
Mm-hmm.
Or at the very least, there's a duty to accept the beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of other people, more or less, figures like a bit of a Fight Club mentality, where like on a long enough timeline, people will come to similar or the same realizations as us, and it's not really our place to rush them. Help them. But to like come in with, I think it's important what Gaspar is alluding to here, this exclusion of all else. Well, even if that does end up somehow being true, it won't be through words alone that it's demonstrated.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've been trying to talk for a little while. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Boy, got ideas there.
Yeah.
But I'm actually having trouble hearing you. You're sort of patchy. I don't know about the others.
I wasn't.
No, he was very patchy. Yeah.
But I can turn down my I'm having like trouble trying to I bought these AirPods Maxes and I'm like trying to figure out what's best to like have my controls to have my mic so that like I'm audible when I want to be. I guess
you might have to turn off the automatic threshold.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just turn it off completely, like set it to the bottom so we'll hear all the noise and static if it happens, but at least it won't cut you up.
Yeah, just let me know if it's like I could turn the down, like the static is coming through too often, whatever.
No, there's no static, just keep talking. You're doing great now.
We're gonna start hearing his breathing here in a little bit then.
I just wanted to say I really like your profile picture.
I mean, alternatively, you could just put on push to talk.
Yep, Conway's game of life, right?
Yeah.
I see a couple of gliders.
Yeah.
Right? Gliders.
I'm a fellow Conway's Game of Life enjoyer.
Well, there's like a bunch of different models of Conway's life. There's like ones where they saw like the bits or whatever, like locating and shit like that.
What's located? What did you call me? That was a joke. I mean, wow, everybody just got quiet.
I laughed.
He said bits, and I said, "What do you call me?" Damn tough crowd.
Oh, what?
I laughed. You got one. Lots of people are just muted, so
I
you
didn't
can't
know
hear
this
their
was like a
response.
derogatory term.
Oh,
I wasn't here for the whole
Yeah, it's
panel so
not.
far, so I
It
didn't
just sounded
hear.
really close, like bitch.
Oh, okay.
I mean, like, at least
I
you
thought
can
you guys
admit
were
it.
going to
Dave.
talk about Automata with Conway's Game of Life, right?
So I didn't hear
Anyways.
the whole panel yet and hear what everyone's positions were. I kind of came in just as you guys were talking about like the Calvinistic origins of Van Til
Okay.
and Precept.
Yeah.
But
So I
you
want to
guys are talking
say,
about objective morality, right?
yeah, we're trying not to get too far down the rabbit hole on Calvinism or
Yeah.
anything like that. We were talking about morality and whether it's objective or not. And regardless of whether you think this issue can't be resolved, this issue is relevant because, I don't know, people of politics more than ever right now. I mean, maybe they don't. Okay, you could say maybe they don't love it more than ever. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I'm gonna say the younger generation is more into politics than I think the generation I came from was.
So
Like in their teens. And so I'm
yeah,
saying that this issue is very relevant because we could say politics is more about ethics and morality than it is about metaphysics and various other branches of philosophy.
Yeah, I
Some might
mean,
challenge me on that. So but I think you at least understand the picture I'm trying to paint here.
I
it's
think it's
about ethos.
that premise is gonna depend on like the circumstance and the degrees of severity, because you can have like, obviously there are ethical about how we should use science as well as ways we should structure politics. So it's just gonna depend on, the severity of the whatever.
You're cutting out. You gotta speak with your loud voice.
Oh shit. I don't know where I got.
Not cutting out at any one point. It's more just like rapid fire disturbance, which makes it really hard to actually track what you're saying. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I would agree that one of the major issues in politics has to do with the way in which people think morally about the actions of the different actors involved, especially when talking about things like war crimes. It's very clear to most people historically that words like war crimes are politically charged with the sort of the values of the victors of World War II at the moment, for instance. And so it's not a war crime if we did it to them, even though we admitted that we felt bad about it. But it's still not a war crime. Like Churchill was in favor of preemptively nuking the Russians to stop communism, but he also admitted that he felt terrible about firebombing German cities and had a lot of guilt and shame about that, even though he thought they had to do it at the time. It weighed on him. And so it's like, on the one hand, our concept of what is or isn't acceptable in the political world comes from kind of legalistic concepts like international law or war crimes or whatever. But on the other hand, those are almost always defined in some like winner decides what is or isn't acceptable kind of realpolitik, which doesn't always reflect our real moral values. And we often feel like just because it's not against international law doesn't mean it's okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Gaspar, isn't this kind of what I was talking about? I mean, so he said that he thought
Yes.
about it, but yet he was still guilty. He felt guilty, and that's the point that I'm talking about, or the point that I was making earlier.
And so I agree. So despite different models of morality, people might have this moral intuition that some people like Tom Jump think about, or this, there might be something to read between the lines that
Hmm.
is a similarity or a common thread between the
Yeah.
different moral systems, even if they're contrary moral systems. You can even say that about the left and the right. It's like ultimately they care about, insert whatever values. I don't know.
Yeah.
Where I'm going to raise an objection is, okay, I think I see that. I don't know if I'm going to call that objective.
Hmm.
Well,
You know,
the way
Yeah.
that he's situation.
Who's
That's
all right? I'm not hearing whoever's talking.
Boy,
Someone's cutting
hello?
out. Yeah,
No,
I'm sorry, boy. You're really having a hard time sound wise here.
Yeah,
anyway,
no worries. I'll
boy,
just
I think I'm
take a
gonna,
listen
I
here.
think I'm gonna, boy, I think I'm gonna order a headset for you. Actually, I've been thinking about it.
Yeah, boy, are you on a phone or on a desktop? I feel like I'm in one of those like racist movies where they call all the black people boy, like Django Unchained or something. Every time I call him boy, I don't know, it kind of bothers me.
Yeah, his
But boy,
dialogue. Yeah, his audio was so bad it's become a topic of conversation. So
but yeah, boy, you can
yeah,
set your input and your output separately. So you could set your AirPods to be your output if you're on a computer, and your input could be like the built-in mic on your computer, which might work better.
Um, yeah, Gaspar. So yeah, you're like, well, I don't know if that, and I think that right there is when you start questioning is something that you should investigate on. You know.
sure, yeah. So I see this. You say, oh, there may be different models of morality, but I think there's a common thread that's been preserved, and I can say,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I think I see what you're talking about, but I can't tell you at length what that is.
Right. Right.
I can't define it rigorously.
Mm-hmm.
And if I do, it appears that as this progression of models carries on, like through history that you pointed out, maybe any definition I give will not be sufficient for the different models.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't uh, I can't establish any substantive definition or model of what that is you're talking about. So I don't know if I'm ready to call that objective.
Right. Right. Right.
You'd
So
think that
did
if something's objective, we can at least say what it is.
did we already establish kind of for everybody what we mean by meta-ethics, and if we're talking about objective morality, what that means in terms of meta-ethical terms, or are we just talking colloquially in terms of how most people use the term?
At the start, yeah, at the start, I mean, we haven't gotten into any esoteric metaethics, but at the start, I taught, it was asked what would it even mean for something to be objective, and
Yeah.
that's not, you know, I answered by saying I don't tend to play around with ideas of objectivity too much, so I will leave objectivity up for someone who says they have an idea that's objective to define. But
Right.
at the same time, even though I'm not a big hard objectivist, the dilemma itself of objective and subjective morality is relevant to our most pressing issues that many of which are political. So, you know, some people might. I almost feel like lots of my friends on the left haven't even thought it through. They'll say, I'm a moral relativist. I don't think morals are real, but they get real hyped up about, how the opposition is so evil. And I just want to know, by what standard are you accusing your opposition of being unjustified or immoral if you are saying morals are just a construct?
Well, I think
Uh,
people could say that something is a construct in the same way that like a car might be a construct, but some cars are faster than others, right? So when we
mhm.
compare two constructs, we can see definite contrasts between their properties, and we can have standards based on some ability that those do or don't exhibit. And I think that's what we mean when we say, look, regardless of what meta ethics you think is accurately describing what ethics really are, we could all agree there's something wrong with ethical norm A, that ethical norm B is better for a reason which we could all agree on, even if our meta ethics are different, which kind of gets away from the objectivity as the important question in a sense. Because all we
Yeah,
mean if we say there's a standard, um, uh, can include like relative standards. I could just say, look, it's bad relative to um, a value which we all share about human life, or a value we all share about, for instance, the trolley problem kind of notion that, involving people who are not involved and inflicting harm on them against their will is something that's a shared value. So relative to that shared value, almost everyone's going to be able to reach some kind of agreement if something is or isn't in accord with that standard. It doesn't make it objective. It's just shared.
Yeah. So, okay. I understand that.
Quick, Mark.
Let's see.
Real quick, Gaspar, before you go. 9, do you have a different profile or had a different profile on here?
I'm new to the server. I just heard about the stage and came on for this, but I'm
Okay,
just
I was gonna
Hicks.
say, do you know who I am?
I've probably been in rooms with you on other servers before. I've heard you before. Yeah.
Tell you who's not.
you sounded really familiar.
I don't
and
think we're like familiar with each other, but
Okay,
we've probably
alright,
been on the same servers.
okay, that's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, I was thinking you were somebody else. You sound exactly like somebody else I'm friends with on here. But anyway, go ahead.
Oh,
Sorry,
cool.
Gaspar.
I love finding out I have doppelgangers, so by all means introduce me to them because we have a funny conversation and imitate each other or something. It's always fun.
Yeah. So the car example, cars are a construct, but we use them, and you could say we all agree on their use in a very general sense, like we're trying to transport with them. But then there are these various alternative ways people want to use them. Like people like my brother, they like cars that go fast. They like maybe cars that aren't fuel efficient. Other people who are into cars, they like cars with handling, like those Japanese cars, so they can drift or whatever. And
Yeah.
other people like me only care about gas mileage. So you take that obviously to our moral systems. Okay. Just like the car has this general purpose. So we all want to be able to drive a car, but that's, okay. So that's going to be something like the golden rule in morality, right? Do unto other, we want to maximize well-being of people or whatever. That is going to become less and less useful the more specific the issue becomes. Just like driving a car is going to become less specific, less relevant to the specified desires of the user of the car. So,
Hold
to
on,
me,
don't be borrowing
why don't
from
you let
my
me? Why
worldview with the
don't
golden
you?
rule.
Okay, yeah.
Hey, at least my version is somewhat original.
Yeah, you can't steal from our worldview, Gaspar. You're gonna do better than that.
Yeah, don't
What?
borrow from biology with kin selective altruism, okay? You can't just appropriate
No,
that as the golden rule.
Nope, can't at all.
I mean, what you could be thinking about is moral evolution, which is a concept I'm thinking about. Very interesting concept.
Yeah, but that's I think that's something that, what? Hold on, I'll finish in a minute. I think Gaspar wasn't finished. Sorry about that, Gaspar. I was just trying to be funny.
You're talking about different cars and different properties that different people
Gaspar,
prioritize.
are you kind of relating this to like an evolution kind of model, which is like we had a piss poor version before and
No.
now we're evolving it to something better?
The answer is no.
I feel like someone was just interrupted there. Apologies. Somebody talking there?
Yeah, Jen, don't call me out like that. I was trying to be funny. I did interrupt him. Now I feel
And
bad.
Gaspar was explaining the car analogy and how different people value different types of cars, just like different people value different types of kind of moral frameworks.
I thought it was about how you couldn't nail down the precise definition of a car in the same way you couldn't nail down a precise definition of morality for possibly more reasons than with the car.
Okay, so yeah, so 9. So I understand what you're saying about the achieving systems that we agree on, right? And I guess, is that something that is going to exist? I mean, let's take that and apply it to our situation. And I don't know, are you in the States? Are you in the US?
Yeah.
Okay, so do we have one of those, or is that achievable?
Do we have like a shared set of cultural values or norms in the United States?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I think so. I think that
Of course.
usually when people invoke it, they're wrong. If someone says something is or isn't American, it's often like a red flag. But there is nonetheless, a kind of Americanism, if you will, of values. That is a kind of a
Well, if we
shared
knew what
core.
that was, I
Yeah.
guess all we'd have to do is figure out how to vote accordingly, right?
Well, the problem is that may not be the right thing to vote for. Like this gets back into politics and how morality plays into politics.
Yeah, and I
Sometimes,
just want to say I'm trying to make this issue, this otherwise philosophically abstract issue, I'm trying to make it relevant, and
yeah,
show how it is directly relevant to our issues in life. So carry on.
yeah, and I appreciate that because I think all too often people just get into the technicals, and that's good in the sense that it develops understanding of core things. But if you don't build off of the core to anything applicable, then it's a bit of an exercise. Yeah. So if we take the goal that we want to learn something about morality from this conversation or future conversations about morality that can be applied to discourse about political decisions or major life decisions that we actually care about. One of the questions that arises from this is, given that different people see they don't always see eye to eye on the claim to objective morality, but they do seem to be able to reach agreements nonetheless in the political sphere. And I think we usually refer to those kinds of agreements as just contractualism or legalism, which is to say, two people have different ethical frameworks. They think ethics work differently, but normatively, they can agree, don't do this to me and I won't do it to you type stuff, which gets back to what you were talking about, the sort of rough shared values that most people can agree on is not all of their values, it's just a subset of them, but it's the ones that are usually the ones we talk about when we talk about politics. Unless you want to like legislate, like no one is allowed to have pineapple on pizza or something real specific like that. Usually we're talking about things that
Oh
enough
yeah.
people enough people have to be in favor of something, has to work on a large scale. It's almost always going to be um, a a subset of whatever people think their morality is going to be their contractualism or um, their legalism. But like it's like, hey, look, I believe this morally, and you believe that morally, but we're going to just take the part we agree on and call that our contract and call that bit that we can put into writing the law. But when we're talking about this stuff in relation to political issues, it's usually because we're trying to appeal to people and persuade them. And someone brought this up about precept, that the problem with precept, according to what's his name, Inspiring Philosophy, that even from a Christian perspective, the problem with precept is that it's bad and it's like alienating more people and insulting the intelligence of more people than it seems to persuade. However many it does persuade, it's far fewer than those it annoys. So I think the question that matters most with regards to objective morality with respect to like real political decisions is how do we or how should we refer to this when people bring it up in political discourse, like if or moral discourse. If you are having a conversation about abortion or you're having a conversation about war or something like that, and someone says, yeah, well, how can you even have an opinion on this if your objectives aren't moral? I think that's the most common issue that we're talking about, right? Is essentially just like when people sort of want to stop the conversation about the political discourse or make it about the question of objective morality to kind of derail whatever person they're talking to. Do you would you agree, or is there some other purpose?
So you're saying that in a political discussion, oftentimes bringing up objective morality is something used to derail the
It may not even be
conversation.
intentional. It may not even be intentional. I think it's like a almost like a Tourette's that people have about any kind of topic, that there's certain things that once they're mentioned, the conversation derails, and it's not always intentional on people's parts. It's just like a tendency. So yeah, a conversation between two people who have different meta ethics, but who have nonetheless some shared values of some kind, and we're able to get through most of the conversation up to that point, in at least agreement about what they're talking about suddenly becomes derailed if one of the two people is like, yeah, but you're just like a relativist, so it doesn't mean anything to you, or blah blah blah.
I believe that although that issue is very relevant to the topic, it can be misused in a reactionary way that lowers the or could even get things off topic. So I believe I have seen the cases that you were talking about. Some might accuse me of doing that. I mean, I'm not overly into politics. I don't really get into politics. Like, I don't vote. And when, if people try to pressure me and allocate me to either side, it doesn't take much effort, to make a moral anti-realist case and shut people down, in my opinion. But so I see what you're saying. I might be one of the accused.
Well, if I'm open to the idea that it's also useful in certain contexts. I was mostly trying to figure out what's the most useful stuff to establish that we can all dig into. So on the one hand, we see it used as a derailment sometimes, but on the other hand, you think that it could be fruitful to point out the question of objective morality. Is that because you're talking to someone who has like a very strong stance that they think that their objectives are, or sorry, the term objectives are moral, that their morals are objective, and that's part of their view being so rigid, and you're trying to open them up to being more flexible and thinking about it? Is that what you mean?
I think that so, as across the board, I tend to be pretty anti-realist about topics, and so the way that becomes productive, in my opinion, is only not through being a nihilist, but by getting to work and examining the usefulness of a model. So that is what I'm interested in, is how people apply their models and if it actually does what they say it does. Like, for example, it sounds like a good pitch, like what you said, is like, okay, we have different norms, so let's focus on what we overlap on, and then grant each other those rights. My question might be, and I doubt I'm the first person to bring this up, is what happens when our overlapping agreements are too general, too abstract to actually address any specific issues? Then we'll be at odds on the issues that really matter, and there won't be communication. So this sounds good. I just wonder, like, you take your average leftist, your average right person, what are they going to agree on? Okay, liberty.
Maybe. Not always. Okay, average. We're talking about average. Okay, right.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
something really abstract, like I don't want to be shot in the face. Okay, we'll agree on that.
Yeah, I would agree that,
meantime,
like,
sorry.
we don't have
Go on.
enough in common for it to be the basis of all of our conversations. I was mostly just trying to understand what we want to accomplish when we talk about objective morality, and because I think this is the most common issue that I see, is either people derailing by bringing up objective morality to essentially end a conversation or refuse to like talk about norms, or in your case, people bring up a kind of anti-realist position to try to kind of talk people down from their objective morality ledge about something. And I'm very interested in what you mean by, like, as talking about what's useful about it and where you can get from there. So if you're talking to a person and they say, well, I believe this and it's the objective moral truth or something like that, is that when you would bring this up, and what would you try to segue into from that point?
So I would I think if I was on my best behavior and best form, I would ask them if they would settle for demonstrating its usefulness over its objectivity. If they insisted that its usefulness is because of its objectivity, then I'll do what anyone can do, and I'll ask enough questions till they kick their own ass or run out of rope.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, I think that it's whether the moral is going to be objective or not is going to be relevant in the case in which you have someone who like for example, let's say someone deploys an argument in which one of the premises is that because their God says so, this is the state of affair. Well, I mean, I think that's going to be relevant then, right? Like to the whole ethical argument that they're having, like whether that God is real. We can think of like situations like the argument with abortion, where you've got a lot of Christian people taking the position that it's wrong to kill fetuses because of the God says that that's the objective.
Yeah, in that case, it's often helpful to have another theist or fellow religionist of their religion who doesn't share their meta-ethical view. So if we're talking about like a divine command theorist, someone who believes that essentially God's commands have moral grounding power, what it means for something to be good is to be commanded by God. For people like that, who hold to the divine command theory and metaethics, hearing another Christian say, well, no, that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says this. It's actually, that we do what God commands for other reasons, other than just this like claim that it's identical to being good. Or if someone who's Christian takes Euthyphro seriously and tries to reach some kind of compromise with it that preserves a meaningful sense of what the word good means, other than just God's commands, then it's harder for them to just be like, oh, well, you're an atheist, blah, 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 because they're often not aware of the fact that lots of people in their own religion don't view metaethics the same way. And they might follow the same norms, but they justify them differently in terms of what they actually mean.
Well, I think that you can have like the same God, but have different theories of objective morality, though, right?
That's what I mean. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Because like a lot of Christians only know about their own denomination. Like that's the only one they know. Like
Right.
they know the Catholic way of doing it, or a particular kind of Catholic way of doing it. Maybe they're like a Thomist or whatever. And whenever you talk to them about how they think their moral grounding in God stuff works, showing that there are alternative ways to still be a Christian. It's like when the creationists ran into scientists that were Christian, and the Christian scientists said, "No, look, this is not biblical, and it's not scientific, and you can be a Christian and believe evolution and geological history, and not be young Earth creationist." Like that's the most problematic thing for them, rather than a person with a totally diametrically opposite worldview on multiple issues.
Right. Yeah, I think they're. Go ahead.
Do we have any Christians here who could talk about their own metaethics or that?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that brute facts? I've seen you argue on Clubhouse debates.
Oh, some of those are not my best performances. So you'll have to kind of like reset. No, it's all right. Yeah, that's cool.
No, I think you're really smart though.
Brute
Oh.
facts. He gave Darth Dawkins the smackdown.
Yeah.
3 times. One of these days, I'm gonna get this third one out there because it has even better content. But
So-
Gaspar's like trying to dox me and everything because I haven't put this video up yet.
He's trying to dox you? What the fuck?
No, I'm just
What?
I think I kind of consider him a friend, so I would hope that he wouldn't do anything like that.
Damn, what's it
I
like
think
being
Eddie's
friends
maybe
with
just
Darth?
stalling. He doesn't want to talk about his stance as he realizes it's incoherent or something. Eddie, over to you.
Ooh, no, I'll talk. What's up? Who wants to talk about some meta ethics?
Well, the question was basically this: if you were speaking to a person, and that person, and it could be a fellow Christian in your case, and that Christian holds to divine command meta ethics. They believe that God's commands are the good. They just ground the good, something like that. And they think that to be a Christian, you have to believe that for like scriptural reasons or whatever that they hold to. What would you say to that person?
I tell them they probably don't know a whole lot about meta ethics because divine command theory is, it is just.
I'm sorry, what was the question posed?
It's if you were talking as a Christian, if you're talking to another Christian who held to divine command meta ethics, what would you say to them if you came from a different point of view?
Yeah, I would tell them that one, I don't think that a moral argument for God is very compelling at all. Probably one of the weaker ones, and it's predicated on moral realism. Um, and you can be, I mean, you can have all kinds of ethical theories. I've got a couple friends that are virtue ethicists. Um, I know some that are divine command theorists, and they're necessitarians, and that's just they bite the bullet on it. Yeah, that's a false dichotomy. It's either divine command theory or modified divine command theory or whatever taste of divine command theory, or not Christian. That's just a stupid position.
So you're just telling me it's stupid.
No, if he was saying they said you couldn't be a Christian unless you hold to it.
Right, yeah.
But you don't think that, do you?
No.
Okay, well then I didn't call you stupid.
No,
Why do you-
I was just commenting. He was just asking what you would say to them, and basically what you said could be reduced to basically calling them stupid is what you said at the end. So I was just chuckling at that.
Yeah, no, I didn't articulate that very well. What I meant was if they said that was the only position, they could. What I meant by all that was if they tell me divine command theory or you're not a Christian, that's a stupid position.
Yeah, I understood that too. That you're pointing out that virtue ethics and several other positions are popular amongst Christians, and that's evidence, at least, that the dichotomy they're presenting is a false dichotomy. They could
Yes.
try to make scriptural reasons why they think they're right, but that's
Right,
going to be
but
okay.
there are scriptural references of commands, but God doesn't just make commands. God also asks questions, makes declarative sentences, and so on. So the importance placed on the commands or the imperative sentences as opposed to the interrogative or declarative sentences, right, would have to be explained.
You were real low. I didn't get a lot of
Yeah,
that.
I turned you up to 200, but if you could speak
Sorry
louder.
about
What I heard him
that.
say was something like
Okay,
that
right.
there are different kinds of sentences.
Yeah. Turn me back up to 100% or all the way. And I'm just going to get closer to the microphone. Okay, just go ahead and do that. Right.
In settings, you can
This is
increase the
better now.
gain too. If you go into user settings and you hit voice and video, there's an input volume. I have it maxed because on the microphone I use, I need to have it maxed.
Right. Yeah, the input volume is maxed on my side too. It's just, I'm sorry about that. I forgot again. All right, but can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yeah.
So there's just different kinds of sentences that would have to be explained. They would have to be explained from those using the scriptural references as to why the commands are more important than the declarations of the questions.
Could you explain that a different way?
I think he's talking about like literal commands where God says like thou shalt type things,
Yeah.
as opposed to statements where God says something is the case or God asks a question of somebody.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm not a divine command expert, so I don't know
I
exactly.
mean, apparently it's not a completely out of the question silly view. I mean, many famous Christian figures, thinkers have taken the view across history. So there's still even contemporary Christian philosophers today that that also take the view seriously, but just in a modified form. They don't focus so much on commands. They instead focus on other uh, intentional states of the mind of God. So, I mean,
Wait,
if, yeah,
wait a
of
minute.
course, the false dichotomy would be silly. That
Yeah.
would be.
So
I would agree with you there.
yeah. I'm not saying it's not defended by. I mean, even William Lane Craig holds to a modified divine command theory. There's quite a few people that do. I don't think it's a very good theory to hold to. I think there's myriad of problems with it. I just think it's stupid when somebody says either or. Um, using like modified divine command theory.
Yeah,
I think
as if either or was exhaustive, right?
Right.
Craig is also on the record multiple times saying that he would just ignore any evidence to the contrary of what he believes if he were convinced of it until his faith returned. And I think he twists himself in a lot of pretzels, taking up positions that are consistent with his own uh, sort of Kalam argument.
Well,
He
well,
has a whole
Specifically
bunch
said
of
that.
weird positions
what he,
on
actually
time,
what
He
he says
infinitism.
is
specifically said that.
actually
Really
what he
said that.
says is when he was asked about if the arguments failed, would he stop being a Christian? And he said no because of the witness of the inner witness of the Holy Spirit.
He made other statements though. So in one of them, he said when he had a professor in school who was teaching him that Christianity could be held for rational reasons, he asked his professor if you were convinced that there were sufficiently justified rational reasons to abandon your faith, would you do so? And the professor said, "Of course, but I wouldn't because Christianity is rational." And Craig said, "Well, then I guess I'm not a real intellectual because I would refuse to change my mind and just hope that my faith would return and that I would find reasons in the future."
Nice.
Yeah, but I'm
He
still
should. He should.
I'm
He should.
still
He
going to
should really
lean towards that
that
being
view.
predicated on his convincing by the witness of the Holy Spirit. It's not like he's not taking like an anti-intellectual
He literally
stance
says,
on
"I
it.
guess I'm not a real intellectual." And maybe you could say he's just being sarcastic because he disagrees with the definition of what a real intellectual is or whatever. But I mean, those are his
Does sound
words,
like
not mine.
sarcasm.
Those are his words. He's literally saying, "I guess I'm not a real intellectual because I would refuse to accept any justifications and would just hold on to faith anyway."
I mean,
Okay.
I'm not just trying to ad hom him. I'm just trying to point out that like he has a lot of different positions on a lot of different issues, like infinitism and time and stuff, that are predicated on trying to make them all fit with the kind of argument that he makes. And his theology seems to be kind of a pretzel of weird positions that are justified by trying to make them all fit together. Which I guess I respect his effort. He's not a low effort guy. Um,
yeah.
Well,
but him being a divine command theorist, I don't think is good evidence that divine command theory is a good position.
no,
Oh,
wait a minute. So I've gone through his entire Defender series, and he represents or represents. He presents every alternative view to the views he holds, and then on most of them, he will say, "This is the view that I hold to, and this is why." And he is extremely nuanced with all of the theological positions that he holds. Uh, I wouldn't say he's all over the place. I'd say he's probably one of the more well thought out theologians that we have today, if you want to call him a theologian.
Yeah, he's thought out. Like I said, he's high effort, right? He makes a lot of effort to know about a lot of topics and to be capable of debating on a lot of subjects like that are out of his domain, like physics, for example, right? I think he makes mistakes in those areas where he's not an expert, like theology. But my point is simply that
Sure.
you might point to him and say he's one of the highest effort theologians, and you put him up there with like Plantinga or whatever in terms of like fairly well-known Christian philosophers. But I think if someone's going to invoke him as evidence that it is a good position to be a divine command theorist, I would just point to the fact that he has admitted that he will never accept any position that would question his faith.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I must have missed that part.
Yeah. It's like
Uh,
I don't usually ad hom people unless people are presented as argument from expert, basically.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
I'll
no,
just point out
that's
that he's a sort of expert, but I think he's a flawed expert because of his position on never changing his mind.
You're saying he's a motivated reasoner.
At least on the question of faith. Like maybe he's a motivated reasoner on faith by his own admission, but he's a good interlocutor on the question of divine command theory and whatever. And that might be the case. But
I don't
yeah,
view his admission that he's going to hold to his faith, despite the fact that his own formal arguments, his framework falls apart, doesn't go through.
he wasn't just talking about one argument. Because with the professor, he was talking about all arguments, right? Like the professor just said, look, there
I
are
don't
lots
know.
of reasons to hold to faith. And he agreed,
Yeah,
right? He said, I like that. But then the professor said, if I were shown that they all failed and that the argument against was right, then as an intellectual, I would admit that I was wrong.
Oh,
And he
I'm
said,
sorry. Yeah,
well, I guess I'm not a real intellectual because I would never admit or accept
Oh,
anything
I'm
that contradicted faith.
I guess I was confused about the scope.
Yeah, I
of
wish I had the exact quote on me.
They're
I've saved it a
all
couple times and then lost it. But
right.
I was gonna say
Because
I'm
I would
paraphrasing
I
it pretty
thought all
accurate.
your efforts rather than like rather than like all possibilities. No.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm not saying you're misrepresenting or taking them out of context, but I would be interested in hearing the context with it.
Yeah, it was actually on his website that I found it.
Okay.
I was just
I mean,
confused.
don't get me wrong. There's a lot of things I disagree with Craig about, but I think Craig gets a lot of flack from a lot of people who just, really don't really, know his work and how he presents his stuff. But
Yeah, I think he is honest in the sense that he really believes his own stuff, but I think he's also like high on his own supply of like refusing to ever believe anything that contradicts his faith.
well,
I'm
you
gonna
just
hold
hate
off
him.
on
Just
totally
admit it.
thinking
You
all
hate
about
him. That's it. You hate him. We knew it.
that.
You
Yeah.
made it clear. You're
Not
just a hater.
high on his own supply.
Just trying to lighten it up.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
everyone's got, I mean, we're
Crack
all mistaken
commandments.
some of the time, right?
And I'm glad you prefaced you're comparing him to planning
Plantinga?
with
Yeah.
popularity, because I was gonna say that is two totally different leagues.
Yeah.
Planning is the shiznit.
I don't want to derail too much into arguing about Plantinga, but we could
Oh, I hear
return to the
dissent.
topic.
I hear dissent in the room.
We could return to the topic of the moral question, though, I think.
Oh no, that's boring. I want this one now.
So if we're talking
No, I'm
about
just
morality,
playing. Go
right?
ahead. Yeah, y'all finish what you're doing.
Seems like we're talking about something, right? Or not?
Well, so we were talking before, just like what is the goal
about
of the
the moral-
conversation?
Y'all can. Yeah. So y'all can kind of take it in whatever direction you want at this point. It's
Oh,
gone for almost 2 hours, so you can keep talking about morality. You can talk about Platinga, whatever you want. I don't mind.
Right. We've hit the open discussion phase.
Yeah,
Oh
I
my
think that's kind of
gosh.
what's going on. The open discussion phase is probably where we're at.
What I was interested in, though, was what you guys were talking about, which is your own views as Christians on morality, and if you are talking to someone who presents the dichotomy. You already said, you don't think there's a dichotomy. You think that Christians are entitled to several different metaethical views that could be respectable and still be Christians in the doctrinally important things that you think make a Christian, right?
Absolutely.
And I think just that alone is like a helpful thing to be able to try to make a case for that, because in my experience, this issue comes up most often with Christians who claim objective morality, often differently than other Christians in the same room. But even the other Christians in the same room don't want to challenge them on it because they feel like they would be betraying their team or something. It's disloyal to like help
Oh,
the
that
atheists or
happens.
something.
Yeah. That happens
Yeah.
in any sort of social group. Or
Right.
Oh,
A damn
sorry.
atheist.
I know they just, they hate God and love sin, and they just spin it and flip it and do all kinds of mental gymnastics. They know God exists. They're just suppressing it. Remember Romans?
rallying the base.
Yeah, it's like any of their knowledge claims in respect to something ultimate or not.
I just want to know how they ultimately ground all intelligibility.
Isn't it obviously the Pythagorean theorem?
It's the golden
Indeed.
ratio.
It's
It's
the
called the
golden
bait
ratio.
and switch. They steal from our worldview to justify their worldview.
You guys know Danny?
I love Danny.
It's Danny.
Danny, he has a philosophy channel. I forget what his philosophy channel is called. And he
Phil
goes
Talk.
by
I've been
different.
looking. I've
What's it
been
called?
looking for his philosophy channel.
Phil
Yeah, I don't
Talk.
know Danny.
Bill Talk? Okay.
Yeah.
So Danny was one of my favorite Christians to talk to when I first came on Discord because he's not Christian anymore, but he's very knowledgeable on Christian.
So he really was a Christian then.
Oh yeah. I used to sit down
I
with
He
him. Like I
was.
remember.
I wondered about that because I met Danny after his deconversion, and he's like, really charitable towards a lot of the Christian positions.
I actually met Danny one time in an after show. And yeah, I think he was Christian because he used to hang around with like those people like logical, plausible, probable, and who else? Like standing for truth and
Yeah.
uh who else? What's his name? Yeah, you guys know what crew I'm talking about though.
No.
Yes. Well, I met him through the like Tom Unboxes.
And like Smokey Saint and like Praise I Am.
Rabbit.
Yeah, so I met him through Tom Rabbit, but I did understand him to be a Christian, and I had discussions with him. For instance, I sat down with him and we looked at the different versions of the death of Jesus and of the resurrection to talk about the differences between the different gospels and the synoptic sort of attempts to meld them together into some coherent story. So when we looked through it, and we talked about the differences about the tomb being empty versus not empty, and there's an angel there on the rock, there was an angel on the inside, there was an angel on the inside that jumped out and surprised them that wasn't there initially. There were soldiers there were no soldiers there. There was a bunch of women versus there was just a couple. All of these different versions that we find represented in different combinations in the different gospels, to many people seem like they're contradictory. And we talked about the same thing with the last words of Jesus, that he says all these different things, Father, why have thou forsaken me, and so on. And we got through them all, and he said, well, it seems like when we talk about a logical contradiction, we would have to have a very high standard for what we would call a logical contradiction being something like 2 + 2 = 4, like something that's definitionally impossible. Like it would something that says, Jesus was
An explicit contradiction, P and not
like
P.
yeah, like Jesus was married, Jesus was not married, Jesus was a a married bachelor, that kind of a like logical contradiction.
Mhm.
And he got me to agree that we shouldn't use the word logical contradiction if it's a less strong difference, because that has to be a meaningful category, like the top end of the levels of difference. And what we would say about a lot of lesser differences in different accounts or whatever, in courts, for instance, we would call those discrepancies or whatever. Like we have different words for different kinds of apparent differences. And I appreciated the conversation because it made me, I think, better and more charitable to grant that. He was willing to grant that there were some really glaring differences that could cause someone to doubt the stories. But he also, I think, was right to point out that they're not literally contradictions in all cases. And maybe one or two of them you could say are contradictions, but they can't all be contradictions just because two people say something different about the same event. It's possible that they could both be correct, or just describing in different terms or something like that. And
Sure. Yeah.
I don't think he was wrong to point that out, and I think he was charitable to grant that he could see why it would be reason giving for someone to doubt the story. And yeah, that's the kind of conversation that I like to have with Christians. And you might say, well, of course you had a nice conversation with him because he wasn't elect. He was a traitor just waiting to happen, right? But
Yeah, I call that shit out real quick. I don't get down like that.
Yeah.
It aggravates me. I don't dig it.
Yeah. But I've had my different disagreements with Danny. There's a YouTube video of me arguing with him where I'm my user icon is on a Darth Maul, and Danny and Jack Angstrike are portrayed as Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan. And we're battling because we were arguing about intentionality and physicalism, and on philosophy of mind. But I really respect Danny because
Yeah, I
I
do
think
too.
I think he was a great Christian, and I think he's a great atheist for the same reason, which I think he's very honest.
Oh, he'll be a Christian again.
Just have to think of the right argument.
Hanging around that Tom Rabbit too much.
Tom's a trip. I love Tom. I'm probably one of the few theists that actually like Tom. But I love
Yeah,
when he
I think
Go
there's a
ahead.
lot to appreciate about him, even if you disagree with his views.
Oh yeah. I like how he has like no chill when with like mod abuse and stuff like that on Clubhouse, and it's great.
The only the only thing I know about Danny is that completely mopping the floor with Ask Yourself.
Who did?
Really?
Danny?
On what?
Was on the name the trait argument or something else?
Axioms and issues of logic in general, and he's just having to like tell Ask Yourself how it is, because Ask
Yeah.
Yourself is talking out of his ass.
Yeah,
And that's the only case I know of Danny from, and I've seen him in the audience on Clubhouse sometimes when I've been on there, but never got a chance to talk to him. But he seemed like he knew his stuff to up to a certain extent, at least.
Yeah, I've had that experience where I'm having an argument with him and he brings up a philosophical idea that I'm not that familiar with, and he's like mansplaining to me what I should understand about it, and I'm struggling. And it's an uncomfortable position to be in, because he has more philosophical training than I do. Nevertheless, I think he's wrong about some important things, but I think that it doesn't look good if you're struggling to understand the kind of argument that your opponent is making because you don't understand the terms that they're using. Like the argument I was having with him was with regards to intentional with an S, and that's a tricky word with an extremely unfortunate name. You guys familiar with the distinction in philosophy of intentionality with an S as opposed to intentionality with the T?
Yes. it's distinction has to do with intentionality, has to do with certain mental states a person has, that they're certain mental states.
Sep, you're back to being totally inaudible, Sep.
So sorry again. Keep forgetting to put the microphone right at my mouth. All right, so intentional states are like a kind of mental states where they're directed towards, say, objects or thoughts. There's like a directedness to them, whereas like intentionality with an S has to do with like it has to do with a kind of lack of an extensionality or a lack of an extension in this regard. In this case, with like
like in a definition,
predicates. Yeah, with like predicates, particularly.
like Clark Kent to Superman.
It's with like, let's say, the extension of the set of natural numbers. You know, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I say is a natural number, the predicate is a natural number. The extension of that predicate is the class of natural numbers. So, like, if a predicate doesn't have an extension, right? It's non-extensional, so it's described as being intentional. And that's the way it started out. At least that's how Carnap did it. But then Carnap criticized those that came later that then said, well, no, extensionality is actually the reference of a particular symbol or letter, word, and then the intention is its meaning. No. So that's a later distinction from like, or confusion, I would say, confusion.
That was a really good explanation of it, yeah.
Because the logicians actually continue using Carnap's sense. That's where they also talk about like hyperintentionality, where like something can even be fake, something can even fail to be or not be intentional or in some specific modal respect. So it's yeah. But then there's people like in Phil Lang that will like philosophy of language that will like continue using the reference meaning sense of intentionality and extensionality. So that's sort of the distinction between the one with a T.
Yeah.
The one with a T is more in philosophy of mind, talking about a
Yeah.
certain kind of mental state.
Yeah, intentionality usually implies an agent that intends some standard or goal to be met.
Exactly. Right.
Directed that's an easy one, right? Everyone, I think, gets that the first time they hear it. It's like, oh yeah, an intention. I got it. And then you get an intention, an extension, and you have to explain like, I like to use the concept of the signifier and the signified and the referent, because then it's like the word, every time I say intention and extension, I'm still getting the hang of it meaning something, ironically. And I have to remind myself that it signifies this thing called the signifier or the signified. Otherwise, I can't, it doesn't stick in my brain. It just like disappears the next time.
It's a bit of a semiotic way of doing it. But the idea, I mean, yours is a bit of a semiotic approach. But the idea is that like you have to start with explaining extensionality first. Okay, and that has to do with particularly logic, the extension of a predicate letter. And typically, historically, that's been a class extension. Okay, like I think in homotopy type theory, I could be wrong about this, so don't quote. The idea is that they take a different extension to predicates, like a space extension or something, more fine grained. I take it than a class extension. Anyway, so yeah, and so when there's a lack of an extension, it doesn't have an extension, that's when intentional is used. That's how it started. But like, yeah, like the way that you're going with it, that's the more that's like well known in philosophy of language that people will just say, well, it's actually the distinction between meaning and reference.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's hard. It's hard because it's like a distinction within a distinction.
Yeah. I just wish the name had been different because of the confusion with a common English word of intentionality, which even in philosophy has a meaning. Like if they had called it like the meaningness and the like referentialness or something like that, it could have been ugly, but at least it would have something in it that you could wrap your head around.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, that's the kind of stuff that I appreciate people like yourself and Danny who are willing to explain it, because there's lots of things that stick when I read them, and I can refer to them again clearly afterwards. This is one of those things that I struggle with. And I think we're all in that position where we want to be able to have conversations where not everybody needs to have a philosophy degree or like spend hours on SAP to understand this stuff. But we have to be willing to help each other out to be inclusive in that way. And it's painful to just be like, slagged for not getting it.
It is a bit. It feels a bit awkward at first. It's like, wait, you can't really just be slagging me. You can't just be like slapping me over this, because it's like, wait a minute, hold on a sec. Like,
Yeah.
This is not the kind of conversation or the kind of discourse that I thought I was walking into here.
Yeah, I'd be really interested to hear like a roundtable of different sort of metaethical perspectives amongst Christians and or theists that have like all sort of prepared their own arguments, so to speak, to try to compare and contrast. Because like I see that's kind of what I find interesting when I do sit into Christian rooms, is I like when they talk about their differences, which are often numerous and meaningful, and they'll affirm, hey, we're at least we're both Christians because we're both saved or whatever. But they'll say a lot of things about the differences between them that another atheist will pretend doesn't exist, and only their position can be right.
Yeah, usually there's some kind of overtures of theological utterances. It could
Do you guys know of any videos like that?
Could be a beginning of some kind of attack.
Yeah.
No kidding. I mean, I've run into that a couple times myself. It's got to always be, always have a critical eye. Theological texts and other sort of manuals and handbooks and from various religious organizations. Always best to do that. There will be fixed features of a religion, things that you cannot expect to change either in your lifetime or even generations after. But there are some things that are up for debate. There are some things that are up for argument. A lot more than an adherent to a religion would give you the impression of. And also, it's hard sometimes to find the documents that state in their most explicit form certain theological doctrines.
Okay, real quick. I want to say we covered the topic of this stage on morality. We had a long discussion and different angles of it. So I'm going to leave the rest of the conversation unregulated. We're really now at the open discussion part of it, definitely, for sure. And y'all can talk about whatever you want.
All right. Back to you, Sep.
Yes, back to you, Sep.